All right, good morning this lovely Friday. It is the 14th day of December 2018. Welcome to AM Live, and you know, as it happens every Friday, the Leadership Forum. My name is Zainab Ismail, and of course, this morning, before we are joined by our panel, and of course, the discussion that will revolve around the space of the youth in the leadership front, we'll take a look at some of the stories that have made headlines on our newspaper review this morning, and I'll start with the Daily Nation. And the top story on the Daily Nation is Uhuru Raila Ruto lead show of unity. It states President hints at constitutional change to end instability caused by elections. That is in page 2, 4 and 5, and we'll take a look at that story. This is what it says. It says President Kenyatta has promised key electoral reforms to permanently exercise the ghosts of post-election violence that have haunted all but one election since 1992. Now, this on his first tour of Kisumu since last year's divisive politics and polls rather, saying which was made possibly only because he and his political opponent Raila Odinga had mended political fences through a March 9th detente. The president said it was appalling that electoral contests have destabilized the country in the past. Also, the article says this was seen as signaling constitutional changes, as the law currently does not provide positions for runners-up in the electoral contests. And I can see Betty Adera, who's one of our panelists, has arrived in studio. She is an advocate for peace and justice. Thank you so much for making it on time.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you.
And just, to get your views on, yesterday and what happened in regard to that visit by President Uhuru Kenyatta to Kisumu. And there was a immense welcome from the residents, as opposed to what had been seen during the election that caused, a lot of division. What comes out for you in that?
I think historically, since independence, anytime a sitting head of state visits that part of the world, it's historic, for a variety of reasons. But this particular one yesterday, by His Excellency President Uhuru, it's sent a very resounding message that, look, whatever happened in the last general elections happened. Whatever drama, whatever divisions, whatever violence, whatever, that happened, and it happened. And let's put that behind. And now for the next 4 years, focus on development, and particularly developing that part of the world to come up and be at par with some of the parts, with some regions in the country. And if you saw the pomp and joy and excitement, of the communities in that region, and the warm reception that His Excellency and his team, received, for me, that also sent a very strong message that, look, as a community, what's important now is to develop our area now, to make our youth, the lives of our youth have meaning, to make the health of the communities there have meaning, to feel that that part of the world, of this country, also belongs, to the greater Republic of Kenya.
All right, and it says here the president reiterated that his handshake deal with Odinga is a total game changer, and that has been witnessed during his visit yesterday. You think this is a game changer in the political scene in the country henceforth?
I think it is. From the day the actual handshake happened, I mean, everyone could feel the sigh of relief, the tensions politically, tribally, that existed at that time sort of like just, came down. And we see that continuing not only in that region, but really in the entire country. And leader after leader uploading and plugging into the so what, of the handshake. What does this handshake really mean? So I think the visit of Uhuru yesterday to Kisumu is an extension of the outcome or impact of the handshake. But I think we need to also pay closer attention to it not being handshake again for the sake of just a handshake. What does it really mean? Do Kenyans really understand, what this handshake is all about? Do they fully appreciate the potential impact of it? And how does every Kenyan plug into that process and feel part of the journey towards where Kenya really needs to be. Some of the pronouncements that were made yesterday in Kisumu, especially Kisumu County and others being, you know, target for the piloting of the universal health coverage, that to me was quite timely. A region that has been, you know, ravaged by, you know, epidemic after epidemic. So to me that meant, you know, a lot. But a pronouncement is just one thing. I think every stakeholder needs to put their head and mind and heart into that process to make those pronouncements have meaning for the common mwananchi there.
All right. And there's this article as well, still on the Daily Nation on page 5. It says, political intrigue over handshake bubbles under surface in Kisumu. It is an article by Macharia Gaitho. And there's a part here, it says, it might have been assumed that President Kenyatta would have a field day with the opposition effectively neutered, but he has to contend with his governing Jubilee Party deeply divided as a powerful faction faithful to Deputy President Ruto and his presidential ambitions remains deeply suspicious of the handshake. But this next sentence, it says, the fear is that the Building Bridges initiative is not just about the publicly touted peace, unity and reconciliation and political pact designed to elbow Mr. Ruto aside and propel Mr. Odinga to State House in 2022. So don't you feel that maybe underneath all this that we're saying in regard to, you know, the handshake, the reconciliation, there are political undertones to it as well?
I think politically, where Baba, you know, has reached in this country and the journey he has taken the country is not something that should be assumed, all right? He has contended for presidency before, I mean, several times. And there's no telling. He might just, you know, contend again in 2022, and it would be within his rights, you know, to make that decision. So whether this is about Baba's presidential bid himself 2022 or not, I think for me, the focus should be not 2022 yet. We can't be talking about one election, then we talk about another. There's a period of 5 years in between that we need to provide development. Social development for our people. We need to grow our populations. We need to make our young people feel that they're...
But you agree that, you know, there's a lot of political talk, even, you know, 3 more years to the next election, but there is a lot of political, you know, talk in terms of, oh, who's going to succeed who and who's going to succeed who. And do you think that is going to hinder that social development that is much needed?
I think so, because if a political leader goes somewhere to unveil a project, we are failing to look at the project. We are wearing lenses of politics in everything that's happening. While I also appreciate that our lives are political. You know, the food we eat is as a result of a political process. So we can't really separate politics from development. But for me, what I think would be key is, could we have even more conversations on how can we move the country forward? How can the sitting and ruling party, you know, implement the policies that they promised Kenyans in their manifesto? You know, rather than looking at everything from a political angle. Those are my views. But politics is politics. 2022 draws near. You know, every day. You know, we get closer to it,
and we can't avoid it anyway.
We can't avoid it anyway.
All right. Another topic on the second page of the Daily Nation in regard to why the president went to visit Kisumu. Of course, it was to launch the pilot project for the universal health care, and that will be targeting 4 counties. That is Isiolo, Nyeri, Kisumu, and of course Machakos. Now, the article says President Kenyatta yesterday vouched for the universal health coverage program, which is one of his Big Four agenda, Big Four legacy projects, amid fears of weak structures laid out for such a mammoth scheme. Now, speaking in Kisumu, the president said that it was becoming a daily necessity for Kenyans to be assured of access to affordable medical care. But there you have experts who are a bit cautious to welcome the affordable healthcare plan. You say it is a great idea, it is a fantastic project by the government. But there are fears, you know, some experts are cautious in terms of probably we need more structures to ensure that the universal healthcare is fully, you know, and effectively implemented throughout, even with the pilot project. Your sentiments?
I fully totally agree with that. But let's appreciate that provision of health services is not occurring in a vacuum. All right? Even as we speak, those services are being provided everywhere, you know, in this country. Now, the choice of these 4 counties for the pilot of this universal healthcare, to me, you know, makes a lot of sense, because if you look at these particular counties, the main diseases, or the main diseases that the universal health coverage should be targeting are actually more prominent, you know, in these areas.
Right.
But for me, the term universal also means comprehensive, according to me. So I think pronouncement is just one part of the deal. But systems need to be made to work so that the common mwananchi in these 4, you know, pilot counties actually feel a difference in terms of how their health, in terms of access, in terms of utilization, in terms of quality, in terms of comprehensiveness of the health services that it is their right to actually achieve. But if there is goodwill from the county governments, if there is that good political will at that level, provision of universal health coverage is actually possible in our lifetime.
All right. And Karl Max Odhiambo, co-founder and convener of Youth Africa Voice, has finally joined us this morning. Thank you so much for making the time for us.
Thank you, Zainab.
And we're just taking a look at stories that are making headlines on our newspaper review this morning. We've discussed that visit by President Uhuru Kenyatta in Kisumu, why he has launched the universal healthcare. But there's also something very interesting here on the second page of the Daily Nation. I'd like to get your remarks on that. Stakeholders said they supported the program, but have expressed worry over corruption loopholes and lack of clear statements on sustainability of that project. Do you also feel the same? All right, and of course, we'll come back to Karl Max to understand that your sound is not yet fixed. Betty, corruption, it is a monster that keeps, you know, cropping up in every sector of our government. You have the universal healthcare. It's just been launched yesterday, but here stakeholders saying they still are cautious in regard to the loopholes that, you know, are created in terms of corruption and lack of clear statements on sustainability of that entire project. Do you feel that project is going to be sustainable in the long run?
Because counties also have a way of generating income. And like I said earlier, if there's political goodwill, the universal health coverage should be sustainable. It should not just be a thing for the next 1 or 2 or 3 years, but it should be, you know, getting better as we move forward in this country. But back to the concern about corruption, I totally agree with that. Corruption is almost swallowing us up, you know, as a country. And the Auditor General, you know, pegs a figure of about 600 billion shillings that Kenya loses every year to corruption.
Right.
And of course, universal health coverage will be one of those, you know, aspects or development activities that would be greatly impacted if corruption is not put to an end. We have had a very strong and deliberate pronouncements by His Excellency the President regarding his intention and will to fight corruption, and we've seen quite a number of heads rolling. But my point in terms of provision of universal health coverage means that the fight against corruption should just get better every day, or else the universal health coverage would just be a pronouncement.
All right. All right, and away from that, of course, we'll get sentiments from our guest this morning. Thank you so much for making the time for us. Peter Quest, Youth Coordinator at the Kenya School of Government. Thank you so much for making the time for us. On page 6 of the Daily Nation, also a very, very hot topic at this point, CS Amina's stand on the new curriculum counters report. Now, this article says Education Cabinet Secretary Amina Mohammed ignored a report prepared for her by technical officers on the country's preparedness for the rollout of the new curriculum when she declared before the Senate Committee on Education that the new system will not take off in January. Now, the report, which was submitted to the committee chaired by Uasin Gishu Senator Margaret Kamar on Tuesday, indicated that the country was fully prepared for the new curriculum. However, the CS, despite having the documents, say that the country was not ready for the new curriculum, to the dismay of officers who had accompanied her. I understand we have the sound, Karl Marx, maybe just to have your input on the same. What is your reaction to the fact that, you know, the country has been preparing to roll out this new CBC, the new curriculum, competency-based curriculum across the country between, you know, standard 1 to standard 3, if I'm not wrong. But then here you have the CS coming to say, I don't think we're prepared.
Thank you, Zainab. One thing, you know, education is not something we need to take lightly. And before you get into rolling out a given curriculum, it needs to be well thought, it needs to be well researched, and it needs to be, I mean, a holistic way of now moving with everybody, I mean, in one goal. But you see, when it's rushed just to make it look like I've achieved, it's you who has achieved, but is it the nation? Are they the kids? Because now, whatever we are, I mean, this is even worrying, because if we talk of a curriculum that is going to be dropped, the books are already printed. We've lost much in that. Kids are already geared towards certain given curriculum. It's already being lost through that. We are going to lose a lot of money in this, because for this program actually to could have been here. There's a lot of much work. There's a lot of work that was actually done with the KICD. Okay, so then I think it is not in line with the competence. Again, there is a lot of questions when it comes to now the sufficient training with the teachers, because again, if they were not actually involved as the people who are going actually to spearhead the whole process, then how come that now we have these questions that we are now raising? So I think it's something that needs to be redone again, and somebody needs to be held responsible about it.
Do you feel it was too rushed?
It was too rushed, yes.
Right.
That is why we are now where we are, because we need not to discuss what we actually passed. Then today I think Kenyans could have actually embraced the entire curriculum. But because it is not something that was actually well thought and well researched about, this is where now we are when it comes to that.
All right. I'd like to get your sentiments on the same, Peter Quest. What do you feel about the fact that if despite a whole year of preparing to roll out, then we can't? I mean, and we have, you know, pupils who were prepared and had started on that journey. Now they have to go back to the old system.
Like, I think I want to agree with Karl Marx that perhaps it was too rushed. You know, I feel like the CS maybe perhaps thought through that we need to just sit down again and maybe expose it to more public participation. I mean, maybe look at more expertise, look at the competencies. Is this something that we really want? I do agree that money has been lost, and of course the investment that has already been put in place might have been lost, but then we need to get the right things right. You know, I don't think it's an issue about how much money has been lost, but it's an issue that are we getting it right? You know, because if we rush this very important, of course, item of our society, and of course you look at education is a very sensitive component of our society, and we look at and we start rushing it for maybe perhaps ill motives, and of course maybe not well thought through. And I think
do you feel the government should start the process afresh?
Not really, but then we need to have more people involved. You know, we need to look at it keenly, and of course it has to be exposed to a number of stakeholders, and of course even the public, even the parents. You know, we need to look at what was wrong with the other one. Then how when we are bringing this one on board, what exactly are we looking for? What is it that was not in the first one? You know, because I remember, if you look at, we used to have a lot of especially technical courses long time ago, you know, looked at art and craft, agriculture, and sort of things. What was wrong with those things? Maybe perhaps we look at when we're bringing them back to the curriculum, what exactly are we trying to address? So perhaps I think it was too rushed, and I think we need, again, as a country, and of course in support with the CS, we look at how then do we able to roll it again. All
right.
With everybody on board.
Okay. And of course, before we continue to the other stories making headlines, it's only prudent I get your remarks as well on an issue we've discussed with Betty here. That's our top story. The president's visit to Kisumu while he was launching the universal healthcare pilot. And we have a story here that was done yesterday by Okokusa with the president's historic tour of Nyanza, rousing welcome from residents. The president brought his handshake gospel to the people there, and with the help from the opposition chief Raila Odinga, things are going to get very interesting. Let's take a look at that story. All right, we will be getting that report in just a moment. Karl Marx, a game changer, you believe?
I mean, Politically, we are correct because the nation now there is peace. Everybody can move from one place to the other. Basically, I think getting to Nyanza at this time again, it's also very prudent because we've just ended the election. The country was actually divided right in the middle. So once we have that handshake, I don't know, now we have the BBI, Building Bridges Initiative. Now, through that process, I think we need to dig deep and ask ourselves, why do we always turn against a sister or a brother in each and every electioneering period? What has been the problem? And can we solve this problem now that we are all together? Can we now have all the manifesto for the NASA and for the Jubilee put together so that we drive a country whereby nobody is now going to sabotage or maybe somebody going to complain about anything? But I think what could have been high in this, the Nyanza people, I think they could have also asked the president about the higher sign that is almost invading the entire Lake Victoria. What do they do about that? They could have also been talking of things to do with the Chinese bringing, their fish, while there is enough fish in Lake Victoria. Yeah. We could have been talking about the joblessness of the youths in Nyanza. Right now, I think, the compensation could have been there because, there's so much.
So is it just for show, you say?
Really, I think there's much that could have been done, just a matter of, it's not just a matter of touring, but what impact do we leave with the tour? Because then generally, if it will be just like once we sit down, we agree the two of us, then the entire nation just move on like that. All what makes people to feel aggrieved, disillusioned, or maybe subjugated needs to be actually unearthed so that everybody feels that we are part and parcel. So once we address all that, then I think, the nation will feel it that there is something going on. But again, having said that, I think the universal healthcare, this is something that needs to be embraced. But again, have we well thought about it so that it's not going to stack as the same way we are talking about the education? So that everybody, when we talk of the universal healthcare, let it be universal. Let us not actually put it within some given section of the country, because the piloting would actually give us a clear way of now rolling it out. So therefore, we need it actually to be felt by each and every given person in this nation.
All right.
Yes.
Peter, very briefly, your remarks on those two topics, our top story, the president's visit, that handshake, and of course, the universal healthcare.
One, I think this is just fine. According to me, I feel like seeing the president and the prime minister and of course the deputy president touring Nyanza and of course everybody coming to cheer them up. To me, this is a good gesture. If you ask me, as a nation, we're moving forward. You see, like what Karl Marx said, there's nothing special about a tribe, but there is a lot of things to be admired with good leadership.
Political maturity, I guess.
Yeah, I think we are making it as a nation. We are looking beyond which tribe you come from. Our contribution as a nation need to be geared towards more organized ways of social development. We look at issues of health, we look at issues of housing, for instance, and of course the topical issue that Karl Marx has talked about. How do we make sure that we revive some of these industries within Nyanza, especially the issues of fish industry? How do we make sure that we actually restore more jobs, opportunity, let perhaps this political realignment of political unity ignite the people within Nyanza, especially the Kisumu area, and of course where mostly they deal with fish as a very key delicious meal, of course, and of course we look at how then there's a country unite and those kind of things. I think politically we should not be divided in terms of a tribe, but then we should be divided in terms of agenda, and of course the manifestos of both Jubilee and NASA need to be realigned in a way that it should not be based on tribe, but then how do these three leaders perhaps need to speak a language that everybody will be consulted on. Politicians can have varied opinion on issues, but when it comes to the people, let the people look at what exactly are the agenda, what are the manifestos that befits the people. And of course, I also agree that we need to be honest about the universal healthcare. Is this something that will actually touch on so many lives of Kenyans? And of course, I do believe that health is one of the greatest components of this country. If we want to live a more dignified life, how do we make sure that every other part and person of this country has actually access, cheap, and of course affordable medical? Yeah.
All right. On page 10 of the Daily Nation matters security. Security teams Probe claims that politicians are funding gangsters. Now, this is a story that was done. It says security agents have launched investigations into claims that politicians are funding criminal gangs in Kisauni and Nyali constituencies of Mombasa County. From November to date, 20 people have been killed by the dreaded gangs and many others left with serious injuries. Now, speaking to journalists at Uhuru na Kazi offices in Mombasa, the regional coordinator Bernard Leparmarai, who's the chairman of the coast security team, said police will go all out to unravel those behind the gangs. Quite, startling revelations there. I mean, politicians funding gangsters, that's scary, Betty.
Yep.
While that is not necessarily a new phenomenon, in Kenya, we've seen even in the past, and especially around elections time, when politicians or aspirants, are allegedly, funding violence. But I think somebody in a position of leadership, just the thought that such a person can fund violence, I think is extremely, unacceptable, and I applaud the security personnel here, institutions here who are trying to crack this. And for me, I think there should be no room at all for any Kenyan anywhere to feel insecure for whatever reason. And if for real it is some politicians that they know are funding this, those individuals should actually be behind bars and charged, so that the message sent out is very clear that that funding insecurity and insecurity of any nature cannot be condoned. This is not a time when Kenyans anywhere need to live in fear or feel unsafe to go about their daily business.
Right.
And look at the number of people who have lost their lives under such circumstances. These are breadwinners, and so this to me is completely unacceptable, and I think the security teams just need to up their game, in the first place, even to prevent. While now they know what the issue is, they also need to engage community members more, so that it's a broader, responsive, approach to dealing with this.
All right. And away from that, right next to it on page 11, Karl Marx, the Grand Manor Hotel brought down. Now, owners of the Grand Manor Hotel in the leafy Gigiri suburb watched in shock and horror as the building was demolished yesterday morning. The heavy machinery, according to the Nation, arrived at the property at 3 a.m. This is after a court order paved the way for the demolition. The court had ruled that the hotel posed a threat to the neighboring United Nations offices. According to an officer within the task force that is in charge of bringing down illegally built structures in Nairobi, the excavator was brought that early to avoid traffic jams in the morning as activity in the city picked up. The demolition started at daybreak, and the task force behind the demolitions comprises of officers from the Nairobi Regeneration Committee. Karl Marx, do you think the Nairobi Regeneration team is doing a good job?
One thing, when you are going through this given story, I ask myself, what was the reason? And the reason basically is about the security of UN.
Yes.
So are we pleasing them, or is it about the documentation that were not right? Because then, if the hotel actually was built with all the documentation in line, then that is not illegal building. So therefore, the reason given behind that is that it's a security threat to the UN. So we need to please them so that we bring down our buildings. That is not the case. If really, the building was in line with all the documentations, and you've met the conditions for you actually to bring up your building, then I think we are not justifying the reason as to why this given hotel was brought down. But again, before actually whoever approved that building to be there, was there some given feasibility study that were done so that maybe you could have not brought it there in terms of, the building could have not been constructed, because of the UN headquarters? If all that were there, then I think this building could have not reached where it is. Because how many years do you think this building has taken there? So somebody was sleeping on the job. This guy need to be compensated, because you cannot just bring a building down just like that, for reasons that are not justifying the needs.
It says the Gigiri Village Association had filed a complaint in July 2015, arguing that that commercial structure in the area violated physical planning regulations. So they're saying we warned them prior to even when the construction began.
So then that means whoever approved all the papers for this given building needs to be held accountable. Because if they have some given regulations and guidelines that before you put up a building in this given area, you will have to meet 1, 2, 3, 4, and all that were met. So my worry is not, the reason why I'm actually trying to, be on the side of the owner is that there is no given point whereby I have heard the word illegal. So therefore, maybe he didn't meet 1 or 2, 3 given recommendations, but then everything is clear. So the only reason given out is that the building is a security what? Security threat, which of course, does it mean that nobody can actually operate anything within or maybe around UN? I don't think.
Do you agree, Peter?
Perhaps it's not to protect the UN, but sad enough, I've never really. When you look at this demolition in Kinley, you realize there's a lot of incompetencies that has robbed the owners. I mean, a lot of investments. Seeing all these things coming down. I mean, this thing took time to be built. You know, somebody went through a full pledge, of course, of these legal documents, making sure that the place was fine, looking at all these things. I don't think they put these things, I mean, out of the blues. Now we want to build a building here. There's a lot of visibility that was done. And I think perhaps, like what Karl Marx said, we need to compensate these guys, honestly. And I don't think the UN really is under threat because the hotel is coming up, you know. And of course, it's also investment to those people. I think the villagers, the Gigiri villagers, some of them could have gotten a job here. But then that is not the point. The point is that how do we able to approve these things? They reach to this level, then we say they're illegal. You see, that is the challenge that we face. And of course, there are a lot of investment. We're talking about economical development, I mean, of growth of our economy. And we keep bringing down some of these things. Is it that somebody was actually sleeping on the job? Then whoever this person is, can he come to book and of course tell us exactly, I approve this illegally or whatever it is that need to be done. I think it's high time Kenyans were told what exactly is wrong with demolition of this kind of building.
Even when Taj Mahal was being demolished at that point, whether it was at the right place or not, according to the owner, he adhered to all the regulations that were given by the people who even stamped some of the licenses that he got in terms of building and constructing his building. And he was asking, you know, the government, come, then if you're going to if I'm going to lose all this money that I've invested in this building, then let those people who approved all these licenses to also be held accountable to the things that they've done. All right, and on page 12, story here, a man kills himself after his wife extends visit to parents. Now, a 32-year-old man has committed suicide in Homa Bay County after his wife extended her visit to her parents' home. Senior Assistant Chief Grace Ombima said Lukio Awino, who hanged himself in his house in Suba West South location in Suba South Sub-County on Jamhuri Day, had agreed with his wife on the day she was supposed to return, but she kept postponing it. She added that the woman who went with her 3 children had been away for a month. And this is not the first story we're seeing of the suicide and homicide rates in the country. Betty, do you think it is the rot in the moral fiber of our nation, or what is the problem when it comes to these issues? Or is it depression? Is it mental health issues that we are not addressing?
I think people are just stressed out. You know, truth be told, people are just stressed out.
With all these homicides and suicides, the other day the actor Jamal was murdered.
Was just murdered, you know. Now this is suicide. That one was, you know, like a gender-based violence that ended tragically. And this suicide has also ended tragically. And we are seeing cases of especially men who perhaps, you know, pent up emotions for many years for whatever reason, and just a slight trigger, you know, leads to this. But we are also looking at a scenario where we need to speak more about mental health and just getting to know our friends, who they are, what their thresholds are. Because if your wife extends her visit to her parents' place and has gone with all the kids, I mean, you can interpret that in a thousand ways. Were they having marital issues? You know, we don't know. It's not said here. But no matter what the stress levels is, taking your own life, killing someone for it, you know, just shows the height where we have reached. So this is a dead man. has left now a wife with kids to figure out, you know, how to move forward with life. The Jamal issue, you're looking at again a dead man, you know, and the country is still in shock at trying to understand that. So for me, I think a couple of things we need to start talking about mental health in a more serious way and contextualize it to our context, you know. How can we identify someone who is suicidal, all right? Because for this man, probably, if the wife came back, you know, maybe he could have beat her up and caused another tragedy altogether. We don't know. But if your wife goes to her parents and you end up killing yourself, there's just a lot more, you know, to this issue than we don't know. And I think especially for our male folks, please speak up.
Oh yes, actually,
please speak up, speak to someone.
According to a report,
you know,
it shows that more men commit suicide
exactly.
than women.
Yeah.
And Karl Marx, I don't know what
Karl
the
Marx,
problem is with men. Peter and Karl Marx better address this issue.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think, let me first of all look at it in terms of an African way of living. You know, Africans, long before, I love the way Betty brought it, Africans long before, things like suicide didn't even exist in their dictionary. They didn't even know that. They were tough people who could actually overcome every given challenge. I don't know what has gotten into our brains, into our minds, and the society that today it's rotten to a point whereby you only believe that in any case of differences, the only thing you see is suicide. I don't know how the solution becomes the suicide thing. Because then that means that we cannot actually challenge ourselves when it comes to problems. There is a way of actually doing things. If really there's a problem and you find yourself that it's beyond you, you will have a friend. Can we go sit down somewhere? This thing is above me. You also can reach out to the religious leaders. You can also have yourself getting into your best friends, or maybe even the same parents that you're making to have now the problem. You can actually reach out to them. So I think it's a matter of we are trying to always concentrate our problems within ourselves. We don't want to expose it. We don't want to open up. We don't want to reach out to other people. So therefore, you only live to an extent whereby you pile so much that's above you. So immediately it pours out. The only thing you will see is to actually commit the suicide. So it is high time we actually, I think because of, I don't know whether it's high cost of living, I don't know whether I can put it like we no longer see ourselves as more important than the suicide we commit. I don't know whether we no longer see ourselves as people who can overcome challenges and then be real people who can be as role models. Because now look at it this way, that you've committed suicide. How will somebody tell your kid, or maybe the kids while they're growing, that you know your dad committed suicide or maybe your mom committed suicide just because there were differences? So that means you cannot agree within yourselves. How do you expect these kids to grow so that they will also agree? Because they will actually ameliorate exactly what you people are doing. So when they emulate this, that means we are also expecting that there's a chain of more suicides coming. So before that, religious leaders need to come out. The counselors, they need actually to come out. So this thing, we actually holistically solve the problem within the society. Let us not leave these people just to die. And when, I mean, if really there are some ways of actually controlling this. All
right. And I guess you've spoken for a lot of men there. And on page 14, we'll take a look at that drawing there. It's by Munene. And very interesting. It's a topic we can never avoid to discuss because it affects us every day. So we have the people, or our leaders, graft suspects. Let me say graft suspects. We're on a podium, I guess, and we have Kenyans. And our son is innocent. The war on corruption has been politicized. They are targeting our community. DPP will impeach you. The threats. We won't be cowed. Community power, community power. There you have it. And that discussion has been ongoing for quite some time. I'd like to get your sentiments, Peter. The community ideology of the fact that we have to stand by our man, whether he's implicated or not in corruption-related allegations. Man or woman?
I think when you look at all these things, I mean, it is very comical in its aspect. I think, of course, the cartoonist, of course, was also very comical, which is the reflection of a society. There's what the president actually had said earlier on, that we should never politicize the war on graft. The other thing I'm also seeing is that Kenyans are also rising up. I mean, Kenyans are actually saying carry your own cross. I mean, that is evident. I mean, no one really want to step up and say, okay, now this is our son has been, is being targeted. Our daughter is doing this. And of course, I agree with Betty. It's a man and woman. So corruption has been a both gender kind of issue. And it's, I think that what we are arriving at as a nation is that the war on corruption actually has been politicized before, but I think we're moving to the right direction whereby everybody, if you look at most of the cases that has happened before, very senior members of the society have been arrested one way or the other. There has been very proper ways of doing things, and of course now the public is aware that, okay, this guy is not eating on our behalf, he's eating on his behalf. People are opening up and they're saying that, okay, this guy, he was in public offices, and of course he robbed, and of course who are the beneficiaries? Himself and his family. So how do we able to carry his cross? I think most Kenyans are stepping out of that, and I think it's right time we lauded this kind of good efforts done by the government, and of course look at the I think the DPP has been very firm on some kind of issues. And I think as a nation, and of course as a citizen, we need to support that. And I think the issue.
So you feel we are actually on the right track in terms of slaying this corruption?
Yes, we are in the right track. And of course, you see, the president was very, very articulate about this, and he was very firm that we will charge you not based on anything. We don't care which tribe you come from, which class you are, which religion you are. As long as you've committed this kind of crimes, the law is coming to your step. And I think as Kenyans, all of us need to stand up and say, this is the way to go. And of course, this is not the war that the government fights alone. It's all of us need to rise up and say, enough is enough. When you're seeing somebody taking bribe, can you engage this kind of person? Then of course, the other thing that I also think we need also to do is acknowledge those who are doing the right things. There are so many Kenyans doing the right things. Those who are doing the wrong things are the loudest and they're the fewest. How do we make sure that we then talk positively about men and women genuinely who are standing their grounds and protecting government or public resources? Yes.
And Betty, even you remember President Uhuru Kenyatta during the Jamhuri Day celebrations asking Kenyans not to just sit and watch by the sidelines, to be part of it and to go and report on such issues. And if those don't listen, go to the media, talk to it, talk about it. I mean, raise those issues. And you also feel that we are on the right track, despite even the DPP saying, he feels like, the judiciary is not helping so much, by releasing such suspects, on very low bail terms.
Well, I think the war on corruption has gained a lot of traction in the last couple of months, and especially with the DPP now in office. And like my colleagues have said, we've had the president himself, being deliberate at saying it the way it needs to be said, insofar as his vision for the war on corruption. Now, but for me, I think one thing we also need to just appreciate is judicial process is an independent process, and they also work with what is the fact, what is the evidence. All right, it is not the judge to look for the evidence; it is the prosecution to look for evidence. So for me, I think there needs to be a point of convergence, between the judiciary and the people who actually bring, the evidence. If someone has stolen, and it is clear this person, X amount of money has vanished, but you're not bringing to me as a judge convincing, evidence on the table, what do you want me as a judge to do? I'm also bound by, But back to this cartoon, Zainab. The Wanjiku we are seeing, almost being crushed, under the weight of this corruption. Here are the youth who are unemployed. Here are the women who can't get access to healthcare. Here are those who go hungry. Here are those who don't know what to do with the maize, that they can't sell because of the same, corrupt practices. Here are the kids who can't move forward because they stole exams, and so look at that. It's just not pictures of men and women and children, but this reflects actually the reality. And I think, for me, the war on corruption cannot be the president's war alone. It cannot be the judiciary war alone. It cannot be DPP's war alone. Corruption is corruption. Big, small, we as a people need to step up into that space and just speak out. like the president authorized us now. We can go to anywhere, even if it's media, even if it's where. But let's not fear to speak up. All these narratives of we are being targeted, our community, etc. No, these ones are, in my view, if we maintain and sustain the traction we have now on the war on corruption, then we are going to see the Mwananchi, you know, like literally standing up and being able to kick all these people out. For me, I think it's possible. We just need the goodwill, and we just need a sustained commitment from everybody to speak about corruption every single day, big or small.
All right. Karl Marx.
Yeah. You know, corruption, in fact, there is nothing like corruption. It's actually outright theft. In Kenya, now we've moved from stealing millions to stealing billions. Just right the way Betty and Peter is putting it. You know, a country whereby people believe that there is a tribe called corruption, so that once you steal, you go and cover yourself in the name of a tribe. There is no tribe. Let me tell you that when you get a leader who goes direct to talk of we are being targeted, we are being targeted with some given people. You know, this thing is now from this tribe to that limit. Once somebody has stolen that money, that person no longer belongs to any tribe, but it is the individual who has stolen our money. And so, because whoever comes out to support such given characters, we need also to put them in. Because what do they know that Kenyans doesn't know about the person who has stolen the money? We are talking of billions and billions of money that have been looted. So once the arrest is taking place, we need not to politicize it. Let these people actually get us back our money. And that is why I can actually advise the DPP, enough of the arrests. Give us just only 2 examples with the people you've arrested. We need to see the money returned back. We need to see these people, their accounts frozen. We need to see their assets recovered. These are what Kenyans want to hear now. But we no longer want to see them being paraded in these given courts. But finally, they will be released. You've stolen, let's talk of you've stolen 10 billion. Then we give you a bond of 2 million. I mean, do you see the disparity? So that tells you that it is easier for this guy actually to go and interfere with all the evidence, can even interfere with the witnesses and all that. So the best thing we need to do that once, in fact, I think this thing needs to be treasonable. That once you've been committed in any given act of corruption, we don't need you actually to be given any bond. Because we need not to act or maybe work with the law. This is not the rule of the lawyers. Let it be the rule of the law.
All right.
So that once somebody has been actually being a suspect alone, that means there's some element of, there's some element of corruption in it. So we need you people, first thing, that once you've been mentioned to be a suspect, first thing, actually you need to be suspended in those offices. Second, we need your accounts to be frozen, so that when the investigations are taking shape, we can actually recover back the money and the assets. Having said that, the DPP is doing a very commendable job, and also the DCI. The EACC, you know, sometimes I even ask myself, why do we have this body called the EACC? If the 2 institutions, the DCI and also the DPP, can work well, disband that EACC, so that we give these people more powers. So once the arrest has been made, nobody gets into so many files. We need these things to be channeled so that we work holistically. And Kenyans can get back the money and also the looted properties.
All right.